Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Picky Girl Travels podcast, the show for Black women who want more out of life and to live it as they see fit. The message here is all about defying convention, embracing adventure, and regretting nothing. I am your host, Adelia Borshade of Picky Girl Travels the World. As you can see, if you are watching this on YouTube, I have a guest today. Her name is Marlene, and I think she's got a very interesting story to share with y'all. I think it'll be really, really apparent why she should be a guest on the podcast. After spending over 2 decades in the corporate world, Marlene realized that the life she was living was not fully aligned with the things that brought her joy. And so she kind of relied on her intuition. She took a huge departure away from the role she had in the finance industry and pursued certification as a holistic life coach. She traded in her corporate gig and now spends her time guiding and supporting Black women in discovering their authentic selves and embracing their unique path to happiness. Definitely sounds like our kind of people. Welcome, Marlene.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Glad you are here. Now, I didn't mention this in your introduction, but you are Canadian, and
I
I don't get to talk to many Canadians.
We're out there. We're here.
The audience of the podcast is, or I don't know who they are, but they listen from the United States, the vast majority of them. And so I can't let this opportunity pass talking to a Canadian um, to kind of ask you a couple of questions about that life and that experience. Um,
Mhm.
as somebody from the US, you know, we have our kind of own view of Canada, and for most of us, it is very, very incorrect. Um, I
It's
was
not always
I,
cold. Yeah.
in my former life, I was a geography teacher. I taught AP Human Geography, and the first year that I was a reader for the exam, there was a question about Canada.
Okay.
And I had no idea how little the children we taught knew about Canada. Because as far as they were concerned, it was basically an extension of the U.S. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you
I'm
get a
aware.
lot of that.
Yes.
Uh, but what I one kind of not opinion, but one view that is, I think, fairly widely held in the US is that like Canadians are super nice. Canada as a whole, the country is nice. And like, y'all don't have problems with racism. It is a much easier place to be a Black woman in Canada than in the US. Are we out of line with that? Are we off base?
Um, okay, a little bit because yes, of course there's racism. However, the difference is that it's not as overt as it is in the US. So, I mean, of course, growing up, I did experience racism, but it's a thing that I think for a lot of us Canadians, Black Canadians, you kind of think back and think, oh, wait a second, like, oh, this person said this or this happened. Like, it's not in your face as much, but it's definitely there. So, in that sense, it's a little bit you kind of navigate your way a little bit until you realize like, oh, hang on a minute, like you recall something that happened and you realize what was actually happening there. So it's a little more, it's hidden, it's subtle, but it's definitely there. But of course the experience is different in the US, as we know, but there's absolutely racism and the same issues faced in Canada, definitely. Yeah.
I was in Toronto a few months ago to catch the Beyonce concert, and we did a Black History of Toronto tour. And the tour guide said that, and she said that Canada sort of went out of its way to sort of cultivate this image of like, oh, we're different than America. We're nice. Um, and she's like, yeah, but
Yeah, it's like a cover for everything. Everyone's really nice, but beneath the surface, it's the same sentiment there, but it's not going to be, as I said, in your face as, that's more the American way, I guess. So, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I guess if you've got to give America credit for something, it's like, you know where the racists stand.
Well, yeah, at least there's no, there's no guessing there, no guessing game. But in a sense, it's deceiving because you kind of go along and you think, everything's fine. And I noticed this more so after leaving Canada and going back, and you're just more aware of environment and feelings and even the way that you might act in a place, like even say going into a store, whatever, you recognize that, oh, wait a second, I changed my behavior a little bit, but I've done this my whole life because that whole feeling was there. Like, no one's saying to you, hey, get out. But I don't think everyone can understand. Like, if you told someone else, like, this is what's happening, like, this is what this person is feeling, or they said this because they feel this way, they probably say, like, what are you talking about? I didn't hear that. But you just know, you have that, it's your intuition, right? You have that feeling and it's there. It's there. There's no denying it. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And so my other question about being from Canada,
Mhm.
on many episode of this podcast, we've talked about, because again, one of the big focuses here is about living life on your terms. And for me, that meant leaving behind, freeing myself from a lot of elements of the quote unquote American dream.
Mhm.
And so I am curious, does Canada have a Canadian dream akin to what we have in the States?
Yeah, well, nobody calls it that, but yes, because of course, you go to school, you get a job, you get a house, you get a bigger house, like, you just keep going. It's the same, definitely the same thing. There's just no label put on it. And that was the thing. Like, we did all these things and then we were like, okay, what now? You kind of step back and look at your life and you're just constantly on the go, just working to upkeep this life that someone else decided is ideal. And we were like, okay, let's pull the plug and let's create our own story. Let's create our own, like, our version of what we want. So yeah, it's definitely there for sure.
And when you say we, you're referring to you and your husband.
My husband, yes, and the
Okay,
kids.
so
They don't make decisions.
how did y'all arrive at that place? Because I always find this interesting. The different stories I've gotten interviewing people from all walks of life. Because I've shared my own story here. Nobody wants to hear
Yes.
that again, I'm sure. But I am curious as to how y'all arrived at this point where you were like, we're over this. We're not doing this anymore.
So it kind of all started, I think, probably when we first got married. We always said, one day we'd love to travel, just, the family traveling. And because my husband had lived in a number of different countries growing up. So that was always something in him. And I've always wanted to travel as well. So, I mean, fast forward to, we set up our life, we're working, we're exhausted, the kids were small and everything. And I do remember one winter shoveling snow and thinking, like, okay, there must be an end to, because we were in Toronto at the time. Oh, my light just went on. Yeah, winter is cold and long. It doesn't last forever like everyone thinks, but I thought, and aside from the cold, in my job, I was not feeling it anymore. Like it was honestly just killing me inside. At a certain point in my life, it did serve my needs, for where I was in my life at that point. But where I was then, I just thought, like, I cannot keep doing this. I just wish I could leave this job. And, so it just so happened that some girlfriends and I went on a girls trip to the Bahamas. And when I was leaving, I said to him, "Oh, didn't you have a former colleague that moved to the Bahamas? And, like, maybe you should get in touch with him and see what's happening." So he was like, "Yeah, whatever." But when I went to Bahamas, I almost went with the feeling of, okay, let me check this place out. What's it like? Would I like living here? What's going on. I talked to people and all kinds of things. And I came back and I'm like, I think we could do this. I think this is really, a place we could have a life. So fast forward, he ended up getting a job offer in Bahamas. So literally a year later, we moved there. And we just felt like, okay, let's give it a try. We'll do it for maybe 2 years, see how it goes, see how the kids do. And then after 2 years, we thought, I don't think we want to go back, because we realized that, what would we be going back to? That same life, in order to live. I mean, it's an expensive city to live in. So you'd have to plug right back into that whole working life and commute and all of the stuff that goes along with it. And we decided that, no, we're going to go in the other direction. So that kind of started our journey, away from that life. I hope that answered your question. I think I kind of rambled there, but
It
yeah.
did. It did. Now, because I mentioned in the intro that you used to work in finance
Yes.
and you are now a coach. And so, um, was the shift career wise, was that before this move to the Bahamas?
It was, yeah, about 6 months prior to the move. And I don't know how it all happened like that. Like, it was something that came to me. Okay, this is what I want to do. And then this opportunity came up and I finished the certification right before we moved. Like, it just seemed like, I had a magic wand and, there we were.
The universe tends to unfold as it should. Uh,
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
say that a lot because when you look back, it very much looks that way. Now,
Mhm.
okay, you worked in finance a little bit more than 20 years.
Mhm.
What made you pursue that? I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm gonna ask anyway. What made you choose that as a career?
I think I kind of fell into it a little bit because when I finished high school, I wasn't sure I studied economics in university. And so my first choice was actually to do international development and travel, to do that. But somehow I think probably the first job opportunity came at a bank. So I was like, all right, I'll take it. And then, 20 years later, there I was. I mean, I progressed well in the bank, in the finance world, but yeah, that's how I got into it. Yeah.
And ultimately, you were starting to feel like this is not it. Like I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine there was a moment when you were like, am I going to be, is this it? Like, am I going to be doing this for another 20 years?
Yeah, so two things. So the first thing was, I think I mentioned to you when I was turning 40, for some reason I just started to question, okay, what is the point of life really? Do you just, you're born, you go to school, you work, you die, if this is it, it's a very cruel joke. So what's going on here, you know?
I
And
laugh because literally when I turned 40, those were almost the exact words that came out of my mouth and was like, if
yes.
is this it? Because if
Yeah.
this is it, like I am a tad bit disappointed. Like if this is the pinnacle of what
Yes.
I'm gonna be doing.
Yeah, like someone somewhere is laughing, like, you know. So when I asked that question, I really, like, I was at a loss, and I was starting to feel like, you know, what is my life going to be? Is this, you know, I'm going to be working in finance forever. And the universe heard me loud and clear, and I cannot pinpoint the moment at which I decided, okay, I'm going to be a life coach. Because if someone had asked me 5 years earlier, would you ever be a life coach? I would have thought, no, like, that's not, do you know me? That's not me. But this is what fell in my lap. So that was the thing. You know, I started to ask those questions, and you know, I wanted to be my life to have more meaning, but to be more meaningful to other people. Like, sure, I was helping other people make more money at the bank, but how could I be of service just to, you know, people in general? So that was another thought of mine. And the other thing is, I'm always that person who likes to go against the grain. So if everyone is, you know, walking to the right, you know, and I say, okay, why are we all going that way? Like, I don't know, everyone's going that way. I'm the person who's like, okay, this is stupid. I'm gonna go left. You know, I want to know, like, why is this happening, and can it be done another way? So that's always my. I mean, mind you, it took a long time for the career thing to turn, but that's kind of how I always operate, you know, against the grain. So
I think it is, we were just talking about like the Canadian dream. You had a job, a career, y'all were ticking the boxes, you were doing the things, and if this is what we've been told our entire lives was the ultimate goal, on the surface level, why would you ever like question that? Like you were doing
yeah,
the thing, you were doing what you were supposed to be doing.
yeah.
Um,
But I wasn't
but
getting the feeling that you're supposed to get. So yeah,
and that's it, it's that part right there.
yeah,
And I think I really wish maybe somebody has written about it and I just don't know. And if anybody listening or watching this knows of such literature, please share it with me. But I really believe that there is something magical that happens when a woman turns 40. It is almost as if this switch
mhm,
turns and like you are reevaluating everything.
yes,
Every, and even if I feel like in the conversations I've had with women, even if everybody felt like everything was great and just going along fine, something happens, you turn 40 and all of a sudden you see the world differently,
yeah.
anew, and you end up making some changes, shaking things up a bit.
Yeah, I think maybe it's like a switch that's there. If you don't figure it out earlier, then, you know, it's kind of in there to say, okay, now is the time. Start thinking, what is it you want? Like, who are you going to be? Because up until then, you're living someone else's version of what what they think your life should be, right? Which, why would you
Absolutely.
do that? You know? So, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
So around the time you turn 40, you
Yeah.
start asking some questions,
Hmm.
reevaluating some things. This is right before or right around the time of your girls' trip to the Bahamas.
So it was about 5 years maybe before the whole Bahamas thing. So,
Okay.
but this was just the beginning of, you know, going down that rabbit hole. Yeah.
And looking for something else.
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
So, yeah. So what happened also when I asked that question was somehow I started this whole spiritual journey, you know. I think in asking, who I was, what was my purpose, so to speak, and all of that, things started, again, the universe started throwing things in my lap. So, whether it be books, whether it be podcasts, whatever, I started discovering a different way, like a different perspective on life and a different perspective on who we are. Because coming from a religious background, those questions are not really asked. You're told, okay, this is how it is, right? And it's up to every individual if you want to ask, okay, is this actually right or wrong? It's up to you. But I started finding information that felt very true to me. So in order to do that, I had to depart from all of that programming, if you will, and go on a self-discovery journey. What and you don't have to believe everything you read or hear, but you take the things that feel authentic to you. And so that's also what I started doing. So I think that is why my life coaching, I wanted it to be kind of spiritually focused, focusing on your intuition and really trusting yourself, because to me, that is the key, really.
I've said on this podcast, and I know I've said it on my YouTube channel before, because I really do feel like I've always said American culture, but now I guess I need to broaden that to be like Western culture, particularly with women, has gone out of its way to sort of remove intuition. There are so many times I can think about when a woman says, like, something about this doesn't feel right. I don't like this. And usually it is the men around, other folks in society, people of authority who are saying, you're being silly, you're being foolish, you're being hysterical. Like, a woman listening to that inner voice, to me, seems to always be downplayed. And we're like, oh, you're not being logical, you're not being rational. And so I think as we move through life as women, we have learned that, like, stuff that down, don't listen to that so much. And being where I am now at my big age, I can now look back and see most of the big things, that decisions that were made in my life that I didn't really love the outcome, is because I did not pay attention to that intuition. And I also think that when you don't listen to your intuition, it still finds ways to talk to you. Like, I'm thinking of a situation where there was somebody who I kept telling myself, oh, he's perfectly fine, he's perfectly nice, but my body had a negative reaction to this person whenever I was in their presence. And looking back at it now, I'm like, oh yeah, girl, you weren't listening to your intuition, and your body was trying to tell you, don't be around this person. Yes. They are not good for your health. So, like, in this time, in the last 8 years since I've made major changes in my life, I have really tried to, like, lean into that, learn to listen more. So I totally get what you're saying.
Yeah. And I mean, in order to fit into that mold that's been prepared for us, you have to shut it off, or else, like, it doesn't make sense, or you wouldn't, follow along that pathway. So after years of, keeping that switch off, at some point, it hits you over the head and you kind of say, all right, it's now or never. So yeah, it definitely, you can take the long route or you can take the short, easy route. It's up to you. You end up figuring it out at some point.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah. So you were on the spiritual journey, and you were feeling that the work that you wanted to do would be in the coaching vein. Do you remember, like, a point when you were like, this is the thing I want to do? And because if you're like me, that then led to some Googling, because you're like, I need a name for this thing.
Yes. I okay, I didn't know it actually existed because I knew people, did a weekend course in life coaching and, all of a sudden they're life coach. I did not want to do that. I needed something that, okay, when I'm finished, I actually know what I'm doing. I know how to do this. So I came across, I used to listen to this, it was like an online radio channel. I don't know. It's called Hay House Radio. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. But anyway, they had all these spiritual people, gurus and whatever. They had different shows. And this one guy I listened to, at the end of his show, he was like, sign up for my coaching course is starting in a few months. It's holistic life coaching and, just everything he explained about it. I was like, hey, like that's exactly what I want. Again, fell into my lap. So I enrolled. It was a 6-month, really intensive course, which was great, because I really learned to hone my craft kind of thing, which is what I wanted. And it had a spiritual focus. And before that point, I didn't know if that even existed, but I knew that was, the direction I wanted to go. So once again, universe was listening and said, all right, here it is. So I did that and I completed it probably a month before we moved. We left Canada. So yeah, it all lined up very nicely.
I think that goes to show you, especially those of us that are like Gen X and older, we were raised like if there's a thing you want to do, it has to have a name. And then you can find the name, you can go to school, you can get the degree, that sort of thing.
Yes.
And I feel like if that name is not obvious to us, or like we don't know of it, we often think like, oh, that thing does not exist. And your story reminds us that as we're figuring out what it is we want to do with our lives, who it is we want to be, what are the problems we want to solve, just
Mm-hmm.
because no one has ever heard of the thing that you want to do doesn't mean you can't do the thing. You can't make the thing. You
Yeah.
can't create a specialty
Yes.
that fits the work you want to do. Because I know that was a big hang up of mine. Like I was like, I want to do something else. And then I would look through the list of degree programs or whatever and go based off of that instead of looking inward and listening to myself and think about, okay, what is the work I want to do?
Yeah. And
How
all
do
of these, yeah. All of these things exist because somebody thought of it and created it. So, why can't you? Why can't you make something new? Maybe out of something that's already there, but take a different spin on it if it suits you. And then there will be someone else one day who's looking for whatever you've created and realize, hey, it's there. So, yeah, I'm all about creating, instead of waiting for someone else to create it for you or give you the opportunity, create it yourself. I think we don't realize that we can actually just make it ourselves. Why not? There's no
I
reason
know
why.
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Many years ago on a dating profile, there was some kind of question about like, what is your dream job? And this is
Okay.
before I really realized I do not dream of labor. And I wrote something to the effect of like, I don't, I don't think it actually exists. But it would be something that involved helping women and blah 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 blah. And then fast forward some years, and I had retired from teaching and I'd moved back to Mexico, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, so you got this time on your hands. What are you going to do? And I don't know if I saw a screenshot of that or what. And I was like, huh, I guess I did, like make my own thing. Now, again, had you
Yeah.
asked me that 5, 10 years earlier, I'd be like, make what? Like, what are you talking about? So I definitely get that.
Yeah, we're always evolving. So you're not the same person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And it's okay to change your mind. I always tell that to my kids, like, do something you love, but if you change your mind or your interest, it's fine. You can also do that. Where I think we were raised to like, you do one thing until you die, and there's no other way. So
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Luckily, my business partner is a millennial and reminds me all the time, like, you made that decision based on the information you had at the time. You got new information now. You're allowed to make a new choice.
yes.
Um, you mentioned that the program that you did for your life coach certification was holistic.
Hmm.
Can you help the folks out here like me who aren't really sure what that word means?
So it just takes into account when the person that you're dealing with, the client, you're taking into account everything, mind, body, spirit, and you have to see that person as being a whole being, which is why it's a spiritual perspective. Because if you go from another school of thought, you don't see a person as a spiritual being kind of in this body, you know what I mean, having a spiritual experience. So it's looking at the whole aspect of the person in front of you and addressing, okay, what is this person dealing with? How can I connect with them? How can I help them? And it's important to see everyone as, don't see anyone as being broken, right? When people are in a certain situation or making decisions, they're actually doing the best that they can in that moment. So you may not have access to the tools that you have when you're in a different state of mind, but it's recognizing that, okay, here's where they're at right now. This is what they can access in their toolbox. So we're going to work with that. But they're not half a person. They're not necessarily broken. They're going through some stage that, they need some help. So I don't know. Does that make a little bit of sense to you?
Yes, it
Yeah.
actually does. And I think that, or at least what the thought that popped into my head is that that seems to run counter to a lot of the way we do health and wellness kinds of things. Like, my the times I've gone to the doctor, I've never been asked any questions where they gave a damn about what was happening with all of me, that sort of thing. So no, that makes sense. And I can definitely see how, if you were drawn to coaching, but at the same time on this spiritual journey, I could see how that would be like, oh my gosh, this is exactly the thing I was looking for. Um, I am always curious because you said like this was happening right before y'all left Canada
Mhm.
for the Bahamas. Um, again, another or at least I thought uniquely American thing, and this may not be the case, is Black excellence. In the US, it is very common for a Black person. I think just about any Black person has heard someone say to them, you got to work twice as hard for half as much. And then in turn, we teach that to our kids and they teach that to their kids. And so, this idea, if you are going to be the epitome of Black excellence, you have just got to work hard, unbelievably hard, just for the little
Mhm.
minuscule amount of acclaim, and that you've always got to work hard and push the boundaries and pursue the right kind of work and live in the right kind of neighborhood and drive the right kind of car. Like, there's a certain amount of that that exists in the American dream,
Mhm.
but then it goes to another level when you are Black because of the disadvantage we face by being Black in the United States.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, because let's say somebody in your situation, senior in finance, um, and is doing all the things, checking all the boxes, and then up and says, you know what? I'm going to leave this good job, this good career, and
Mhm.
I'm going to go be a holistic life coach. Like, that would not be received well by by the elders in the community, the folks who are saying, what are you doing? Why are you giving up this good job? Like, uh, so I wonder, is that a thing? Was that a thing in your experience as well?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the same thing is there, maybe to a slightly lesser degree in my experience. But yes, there's all, you have to be, a million times better. Um, Especially like being in finance, yes, I moved up, but not as fast as some people. And a lot of things I did were questioned, like someone's always watching. And these are things that I realized looking back, you know what I mean? So, yes, that's there. And then the whole life coaching thing, I did get a lot of, well, what is a life coach? So there were questions, but what helped me is the fact that we were leaving the country and I had to quit my job. So I kind of had an out there. And I think for me, it would have been harder to pursue this if I stayed in Toronto, because it's just me. Like, I think, I wanted to do this, but I think for myself, it would have been harder for me to just break out and do it if I did not have the opportunity to leave and kind of reinvent myself. So, again, I think when you really want something, yeah, the universe sets up the parameters that you need to thrive and to go forward in that area. Um, so yes, there was a little bit of what, but also, yeah, I'm leaving, so bye. Here's what I'm doing. So that's fine. Now I don't really
I
care.
I think there is something to be said, and Stephanie Perry talks about this a lot, that like when you go to a new place, you get to be somebody new. And I think kind of the reverse of that can apply as well. Like if you want to be somebody new, maybe the thing to get you started is leaving the place that you already are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, we started this conversation about you being a life coach, but we did not clarify what that was. And I'm making the assumption, because of, the kind of things I talk about to people who are my guests, but that's kind of a mistake on my part. So, we should back up a little bit and explain, like, what is a life coach?
Okay, well, life coach essentially coaches you through life by providing the tools that you need. So, as I said, my focus is finding and using your intuition. And you use it to make so many decisions in your life. And so my goal is to empower Black women. Like, I'm not here to tell you, you tell me your story. I'm not here to say, okay, you need to do A, B, and C. I'm asking you the questions. Okay, what do you feel that you need to do? I want to teach women to look inside themselves for the answers, because that's where they are, and that is something that you carry with you throughout life. It's like a guide for you. So it's about expanding your toolbox to get you through life. Like, different things come up. Okay, what do I do now? What did I learn? What can I tap into to help me over this hump to get me where I want to go? Also, we have a lot of blocks in our life. Like, it might be from environment, it might be from upbringing, certain thought patterns and things that we hold on to. Why are they there, and how do we get rid of them? And that's something that, you know I ask you the question, okay, what is the thing, what is the block here? Why is it there? Where did it come from? Does it serve you? Okay, let's work to get rid of it. So rather than, I think people tend to think it's kind of like being a therapist or a counselor. It's not, because I think those people are more apt to tell you, okay, maybe you should do this. But I want you to tell yourself, okay, this is the problem. This is what I know I should do. That way it never leaves you. That way, like, you're not depending on me for life. I don't want I don't want lifelong clients. I mean, hey, if you want to pay me for life, that's fine. But I want I want the person to leave me feeling like, okay, I've got this. I have my toolbox. I feel, you know, sturdy. I can get through this. So that's
Okay. Okay. I think that's a great explanation.
mhm.
Um, and I think it's, I know that there might be a reaction of like this, like we didn't have life coaches when we were younger. And I would say, well, we probably could have used some. But
Yeah,
it's like I do like this place where we are in time, where there are a variety of ways for us to get the assistance, whether that be a coach, a therapist, a counselor,
yeah,
because I one thing that has not changed is living on earth in as a human. It is hard,
it is hard.
particularly when you are in a white supremacist world, when you are not a white man. It is doubly, triply difficult. And so having some help, some resource out there to help us navigate that, as opposed to 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, where that just wasn't done. Folks just had to struggle. And,
Mhm.
those of us who could teach ourselves to swim did, and those who couldn't drowned.
Yeah, there was years ago there wasn't this help, but I think if even if you're someone who doesn't necessarily think you need to seek help, just having that internal conversation with yourself. I'm always talking to myself inside, figuring out things. And, I think people probably would think I'm crazy, but especially when we were wearing masks, I was talking out loud, but nobody knew. But, you kind of have to have that conversation with yourself, check in, what's happening? How am I feeling? Why am I feeling like this? How can I change it? Or do I need to take a break? Whatever, we have to learn to do this. And I think a lot of that self reflection and just checking in with yourself can make a world of difference when you're actually aware of, okay, when this happens, I feel like this, or, you know, I'm going to this job, I feel terrible. Why? Is it the people? Is it the job? What do I need to do? So in every aspect of life, that self reflection and that internal voice is your guide, really. Like it's a self navigation system. We have internal GPS. We're born with it, and it's a shame that we're just learning to use it because it's there for a reason. Turn it on, you know. So yeah.
One of the questions I have here, and you may have just answered it, is because you said like the focus of your work is really about helping Black women like trust their intuition. And so my question was, why should Black women lean into their intuition, listen to their intuition, trust it?
It never steers you wrong. Even if you think, no, there's no way, right? That's the point at which you should do that thing, right? Because that's the other part of you kicking in and saying, like, no, you don't want to do this, run the other way. But that ideas come to you, inspiration, it comes to you for a reason. It's not coming to someone else, it's coming to you for a reason. So I distinctly remember driving to the airport when we were on our way to Bahamas. Like I had that moment of panic, like, okay, are we actually doing this? But then there was another part of me that was like, yeah, like you're doing this, you're going to be fine. It's almost like jumping off a cliff, but you're going to be okay, and if you practice doing that, just making those decisions that scare you, but realizing afterwards, hey, wait, like I did it, I'm fine, and I'm maybe better for it. That kind of gives you confidence to keep trusting the intuition.
So if somebody listening to this or watching this has grown up in Western culture, so that
Mhm.
meant they've spent the bulk of their existence here on Earth probably ignoring their intuition, not
Mhm.
listening to it, tuning it out. How How do you do that? How do you go from I'm completely disregarding it to like, how do you start where you're like, okay, I'm gonna give this a try. What would that look like?
Yeah, well, I mean, do it in small ways. You don't have to turn your life upside down, but going through everyday life. It could be even, you meet people every day, and some people you automatically connect to, some people you're like, I'm not too sure. Why is that? Right? That's your intuition. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. Maybe they're not your person, but it could even be just tapping into that sense of, okay, do I want to be around these people or this person today? Or what do I want to in daily tasks in life, in your daily life? What should I do? What do I want to do? Like, check in with that feeling. If it's a good feeling, and when it feels right. We all know that we all feel that gut feeling. Go through your day trusting your gut in small ways, right? And notice what happens. What's the outcome of that decision that you made by trusting your gut? It's the first step. So that's baby steps, and from there broaden that into more things in your life, more parts of your life, and you will start to rely on it a little bit more. And then one day you can turn your life upside down. That's the end result. But in very small everyday things, start to check in. Okay, do I feel like doing this, or should I do this, or should I say
Okay.
this, or in anything.
Yeah, I think about how much of my life I spent holding my tongue. And I know there are people listening to this like, hold on. The things that come out of your mouth. And I'm like, yeah, y'all just don't know. I have been holding all of these years, which is why very much now unfiltered things come out of my mouth with whatever results happen to happen. Um, so I'm curious, you've had this big transformation in
Mhm.
your life, how you're living your life, how you're going through life, and you're leading with into your intuition. Is this something that you're making a point to focus on with your children?
They're teenagers, so they don't really listen to me. But I do tell them that whole thing about making your own decisions, doing what you love. Um, that is the part that I can kind of give to them right now. I mean, they're at that stage where okay, they're going to do their own thing, but I try to give them little bits that they can absorb. Because really, if I sit and talk to them about intuition, yeah, that's that's not happening. So I mean, I just different, I think about me. I mean, they're 15, they're twins. So I think about who I was at 15. If someone was telling me that stuff, I probably wouldn't listen either. So it's a matter of giving them the lessons I've learned, but maybe not in that kind of what do you want to call it? That mode, like not it's not saying okay guys, you got to go out in the world and trust your intuition, but no, it's decide on things that you love to do, make your own decisions, be sure in the decisions that you make, right? And it doesn't have to do with what anybody else thinks. We don't tell them what they should pursue. We allow them to pursue their own interests. So I think in that way I'm able to kind of feed it to them like that for now. And, maybe in a few years, they'll come back and be ready to talk about it in a more mature way. But yeah, that's kind of how I can give it to them at this point. I think it's important to note that it's a continuing journey. It's not as though, like, this has been 10 years, kind of, this is my journey, and it doesn't stop. I think people might tend to think that, okay, she made this transition, she's, changed her life or whatever, and now she's here. No, it's always a continuing journey because the world is always changing, as we can see. Situations change, you change. So that's why I love the life coaching so much, because whatever tools you have, you can apply it at any stage in your life to anything that's happening in your life. And I'm continuing to grow. So is everybody else. And it's also a healing process. Like, we're kind of healing from those people that we were and things we went through, growing up, or whatever. It's a healing process, but it's also healing for me as the coach, because other people, I learn from others as well. Yes, I'm coaching you, but we're all going through this life together. So, yes, I may be considered an expert, but I'm not an expert in everyone's life. So there might be something that a client says to me that is a light bulb moment for me, and I learn from them. So I kind of like that it's a reciprocal type of process, that I'm teaching them, but I'm also learning from them, and I think it's a really nice way to connect. Yeah.
Okay. If somebody has heard what we've talked about here today and they're thinking to themselves, this sounds interesting. This might be the thing that I've been looking for, or like I'd like to give this a try. If
Mhm.
somebody wants to see about working with you,
Mhm.
how do they do that? What does that process look like?
Yeah, they can go to my website, which is joyfulsoulcoach.com, and you can see a little bit about me. You can book a coaching session with me. You can reach out and send me a message. That's the best way to find me. I am on Instagram, kind of. It's there, but the best way is via my webpage, my website. Thank you. And it's just so nice to have this community of women who are just striving for something better. Just a really nice thing to have. And it's empowering for all of us. And, I'm not going to say I hope it continues. I know it will continue, because we can't turn back now. Never turn back. That's another lesson. Never turn back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so you mentioned your website,
Yes.
but there might be another place people can connect and find out things.
Yes, I do have a YouTube channel, which is Joyful Soul Coach. And it's just starting out. It's up and coming. So I would love for people to join me there. And I'll be sharing um, little insights, little things to help you along. Probably, hopefully, hosting some lovely guests at some point. But that's another venture of mine, which I'm really excited about. So you can join me there, joyfulsoulcoach.com, my website, or Joyful Soul Coach, my YouTube channel.
Hope you enjoyed hearing from Marlene. Um, I find her story so interesting about, leaning into intuition and how she has parlayed that into the next phase of her career. But as you can tell, there is a little bit more to the story. They moved to the Bahamas, but currently they live in Japan. And so, if you're interested in hearing more about that part of her life, moving abroad with a family, multiple countries, being the I don't want to say trailing spouse, but I can't really think of a better term. She will be on my YouTube channel on a Wednesday night live, 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on September 20th, 2020. So, hope you all will join me there. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast and supporting me and sharing episodes and reviews and giving it a thumbs up on YouTube. Thanks so much. And until next time.